Alright, Davka Anachnu. Specifically us. Eik, you're talking to Davka Nor Nelka Shechapel Gamani and Deutsch to learn who they are, Habiula. How is it specifically that we are the us, a very low generation, is the generation that is going to bring the Geula?
Speak louder.
The question is why us? Specifically why us? So normally the expression goes onwards and upwards, but when it comes to Yiddishkeit, I guess going from Avram Avinu and onwards, it's really onwards and downwards. At least in terms of holiness, I guess. Starting from the Avos, and then of course the generation receive the Torah, then to the Nevi'im, and the Tanaim, and the Amoraim, and the Gainim, and the Rishonim, and the Achronim, and the Achronim, Shel Achronim. Until now, there's been a constant descent of, I guess one would say, natural Ruach HaKodesh, let's say, that most people have. And so the question is, why is our generation, Ikva Asad Mishifa, going to be meritorious to bring the Geula? So there's a few common answers. One of them is, I'm sure you've heard before, it's the dwarfs on the shoulders of giants answer. Basically, the mashal is that the the giant can see very far, but if the dwarf stands on top of him, he can see farther. It's the mashal. The nimshal is that we receive all of the Torah of those who have come before us, and all the work that they have done is that which we build upon. And actually, the idea is that the irony is that even though they are so much greater than us, because there's no comparison. It's Ein Arach, really, their generation, our generation. The irony is that we reveal deeper secrets of the Torah than they do. Let's just to give some examples in Nigla. For example, deep pratim of Hashem's wisdom is a vitra for realization, halachically okay, or maybe chalostam, or all these ideas, crossing the date line during the Omer, the plane, all these ideas, all these intricacies that we delve into. These are for our generation. These are great depths of Hashem's Torah, actually, just in Nigla. It is up to our generation to discover and to delve into that had no shaykhs or relevance to generations who are much greater than us. And so we have all of their svarim, but we can't just say that we are standing on their shoulders. We have to actually pick up the sefer and use it. That's the idea. It doesn't help to say that we're just sitting on their shoulders. We actually have to do something, in Maisa. And another explanation of the greatness of this generation, I guess the hidden greatness, or let's just say the greatness that we can utilize, let's just say, towards being Geula, is the idea that the fundamental difference between good and evil in this world is basically that evil isn't really something of itself. It's really every evil has to stem from something that's actually true. So what happens is as time passes on, if something good was done, if a mitzvah was done, that goodness is actually inherently retained in creation, as if some evil action was done, it is destroyed and actually even turned over to good through teshuvah. And this is simply, as I said, because it is not actually something in of itself. All evil has to have its roots in goodness. So, for example, if you look at all the false religions most of the false monotheistic religions in the world are all based on the idea. All still go back to Matan Torah. They still admit that Matan Torah happened. Except, afterwards, they say there's a slight deviation of plan, so to speak, and they say the whole thing changed after all. But really, the only reason that they had any credence whatsoever is because they're based on some truth. Because they're based on Yiddishkeit. Another great example about how falsehoods are. Another great example of something unique, let's just say, about our world is really actually that these falsehoods can exist. I mean, it is true. Think about it. It is true that there's also spirituality in higher worlds. Why can't you take a little small kernel of truth in higher worlds and make a whole falsehood, elaboration of falsehood upon that? Why is that specifically something that can only happen in our world? And the reason for this is one word: equilibrium. If you look at the human body, the irony is that if you look at your metabolic system, the metabolic system is actually it's something that's constantly in a state of tumult. let's just say it's actually trying to create a balance of chemicals. But the idea is that if your body were to ever actually really achieve that, you would die. You would die. Your body, your survival of your body is dependent on the fact that it's actually striving towards equilibrium. So the idea is, what is equilibrium? Equilibrium, in a way, is death. When things reach equilibrium, they're not living. They're not alive. When I look at the world, look at this pen, and I drop this pen, I say the pen is in equilibrium. I drop the pen, the world just returned it to equilibrium. It's now just resting on the table. It's just sitting there and it's existing. The difference between this world and a higher world is that if you look at it from one side, if you look at two polar opposites of the world, the Sitra Achra and the Sitra Kedusha. And the way it works is that right in between the two, as the two exert their forces, is our world. So there's an equal exertion of force from Sutra Kedusha and Sutra Achra that are existing in our world, and because there are equal forces, they stand. And they stand, it's in equilibrium. And you can't see a cause and effect. See, if in the world of Sutra Achra, if there would be greater amounts of Ra than good. In which case, there would be a lack of balance. In which case, you'd be able to see a cause and effect. And if there's a cause, there has to be a source of the cause. See, that's the difference. In other worlds, in higher worlds, whether they're good or evil, whatever it is, Sutra Achra, you can see, you cannot deny the fact that there is a source for everything. In our world, there exists this ability to doubt that because there is a natural equilibrium. So the idea is that through following Hashem's Torah, you actually break that equilibrium, and you actually create goodness in the world, and that's really all that maintains it, and all that will remain. And another aspect of our generation is really that if you want to compare it to the Avodah that other generations had, it's pretty simple. The leftovers of all the work that needs to be done is very simple. It's like you can look at every generation has a mission. And previous generations had very difficult and complicated missions in that, because basically their Avodah was to refine darkness of Galus. That was their major Avodah. And they had to have great power to do so. So they had great Tzaddikim, and they were also great Rishayim in these generations. But they had great sources with which they could deal with these great missions. All we have left is a very simple task. It's like the mashal is that if you're building a mansion, the mansion has already been built. What we're doing is we're just dusting it off a little bit. We're cleaning up the dirt here and there. So the rather obvious question is why hasn't it been done? And this seems like this is actually the easiest job. And we thinking of bringing Moshiach as the hardest thing you can possibly do. This is actually the easiest thing you can possibly do. And our Avodah is actually, it's compared to their Avodah, much easier. Oh, so you can say, okay, so therefore Hashem didn't make us nearly as great. That is true. But there's another aspect, really, which is why it's very difficult, There's another real underlying aspect, And this underlying aspect will tell you why it cannot be done by them. If Moshe Rabbeinu came to our world right now, he could not bring Mashiach. By definition, it's just, in other words, he needs to be in Davka. It has to be somebody of this generation that does it. And the reason is because of our lack of greatness. Of course. Thank you so much, Robbie. And the idea is that only it has to be brought about through a true level of Mesiras Nefesh. And a true level of Mesiras Nefesh, well, let's just start out like this. There's an advantage to this, because there's a great amount of darkness and there's a great amount of obstacles to our Torah and our mitzvahs. Nonetheless, the Torah is kept. Fine, different levels here and there, but in general, the Torah is kept. And the truth is in this way, we're really going to be able to discover who loves Hashem. See, that's the ikr. When we're only at this level, where we're not constantly compelled by our feeling of our neshama, it has to be based on emunah. It has to be basically based. In the end of the day, you have to basically make it you have to make a decision. You have to choose. You have to have some sort of natural Mesiras Nefesh that comes from really just the depth. You have to be able to This is like the idea of true bittul. It requires a serious nefesh, and it requires the idea. Oh, and Rabbi, it requires the idea of true bittul. And what is true bittul? We actually just spoke about it last night at Farbrengen. And true bittul is the idea. It's not the idea that you're low or a shmata or something like that, or it's not the idea at the same time that you're great and just hiding it somehow. The real idea of bittul is that you recognize how you are part of a system and that came before you, and that you can only really do your job because of what they have done. And so, anybody in their generation who thinks that they can bring Geula and Matzah themselves must be off the rocker. Look at us, we're interested in our iPhones, we're interested in our iPads, I this, I that, whatever it is. Yet we're going to be the ones who bring Geula. It's impossible to deny. It's impossible to basically think of yourself as a yeshus in this way. There's a natural impossibility of a certain amount of yeshus. And bittul it's just a natural part of our being. This is the generation of bittul. That's what it is, in its greatest irony. And it says that Moshe Rabbeinu's bittul himself, he had through his ruach hakodesh. The reason he is such a great bittul is because he was actually humbled by our generation. Through his ruach hakodesh, he saw that our generation would be the one to be Moshiach, and that even though we had great darkness around us, and that we were like a Dor Yisayim, or a generation of orphans, and so he would see that nonetheless, we would be the ones that have to do it, and that's one of the major reasons he was so humble, because he was humbled by our humility. So may we utilize the kayach of the previous generations that came before us to bring Geula now. Take me on.
Amen.